Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll be splitting my time with the member from Monami, Lalit, Kamouraska, River, Duluth. Speech over. I hope I didn't embarrass that, my honourable friend. Madam Speaker, throwing all kidding aside, I'm happy to be here today to speak about the softwood lumber situation. It directly affects my riding of Yellowhead. We're one of the largest areas of Alberta, along with my colleague to the north in West Loch Peace River. We have most of all the logging in the province of Alberta, which employs well over 100,000 people. So I'm very concerned. You know, back on October 12, 2016, the Softwood Lumber Agreement expired between Canada and the United States, an agreement that was made by the previous Conservative government. Here we are 2 years later, Madam Speaker, with no softwood lumber agreement. 2 years, no softwood lumber agreement. And then, to add insult to injury, the U.S. is back to their old tricks of hammering Canadian forest companies with U.S. duties. And some of those affect the mills in my area, such as West Fraser Limited, which is 24.12%, Madam Chair. That's a pretty high amount. You know, when the Conservatives were in government, they inherited softwood lumber. Well, they didn't inherit. There was no softwood lumber agreement. Sorry. They actually developed a softwood lumber agreement with the U.S. government in 3 months of negotiating. A softwood lumber agreement that was very good for Canada, a deal that saw the softwood lumber industry grow from coast to coast, Madam Chair. You know, in fact, I was on City Council for the City of Fort St. John when this deal was ratified. And I remember just prior to that, the mill in the City of City of Fort St. John was thinking of closing. The markets were poor, no chance of expanding. The mill just up the road from us in Fort Nelson had closed after being open for many years. But then the softwood lumber agreement was signed. And lo and behold, you saw companies looking at the future and saying, hey, we can invest. We can modernize our technology. We can expand our operations and we can make money. In fact, Madam Chair, shortly after that, two major companies in northern British Columbia came together. One was an American company and built a new plywood facility in Fort St. John, employing close to 400 people. That's what a softwood agreement does for you. It gives companies security. It gives them a long-term forecast. We haven't got that today, Madam Chair. Mr. Speaker, close to 400 jobs are at risk across Canada because we do not have a softwood lumber agreement. This government has failed Canadians, failed the softwood lumber industry. Now, what happens? Well, they're into NAFTA agreement. They got to try to get NAFTA signed, but they still have this softwood lumber agreement in the back. And they're being hit hard by our U.S. counterparts. And I'm afraid, Madam Chair, that the softwood lumber segment of our country is going to hurt. You know, Madam Chair, close to 20% of Canada's GDP comes from Canada's natural resources. And those natural resources, of course, are energy, mining, and forestry. So a big portion of the money that this country runs on comes from forestry, right across this country. You know, Madam Chair, I think today the Prime Minister is in Lac St. John, I believe, a community of over 5,000. It's a softwood lumber community, softwood lumber region. And yet, you even go back to the Prime Minister's letter of intent, he never mentioned softwood lumber at all. Shame. Does this Liberal government have a plan regarding softwood lumber? It makes me wonder, Madam Chair, because 2 years of negotiations have failed to give us a softwood lumber agreement. The three sectors I just spoke about, Madam Chair, employ almost 2 million Canadians. And you know what's alarming, Madam Chair? All three are declining because of this government. A government that states it's here for the environment and sustainability of Canadians. And I listened this morning at a breakfast to the minister, and she spoke very elegantly about sustainability and Canada's future and industry working to protect the environment. But you know what? That's not happening, Madam Chair. We all know, and I don't think there's anybody in this room, Madam Chair, that can say that industry can survive without the environment. We know it relies on the environment. And industry in Canada has proven that we are probably the best examples of stewards of the environment when it comes to industry anywhere in the world, Madam Chair. Industry can help Canada be sustainable. We know that. As noted before, it's a large contributor to our GDP. And it can do so while protecting the environment. And they have proven that time and time again, Madam Chair. 20% of our GDP approximately. Yet we have a government that has put hurdles in front of them that is making it financially not feasible for some of these industries to exist. Energy East, gone south. Northern Gateway, in limbo because there's a moratorium of no ships that haul crude oil on our west coast, but they can do it on the east coast. We must have environmental laws, and this government must work with Canadians and industry to develop a sustainable economy. And they cannot do it in a silo, making up all the rules themselves and then dumping them on Canada's society and Canada's industry and saying you have to do this. We know exactly what happens. All we have to go back to is Energy East. They put in some rules right in the middle, and the company closed up its operations. They are failing us in the softwood lumber industry, and I fear, Madam Chair, for 171 municipalities across Canada, that's from coast to coast to coast, that are directly derivative of the forest industry. And these communities are going to be hurting. They're hurting right now, and they're going to hurt in the future. I can go back before our Conservative government initiated the Softwood Lumber Agreement. And I remember when 15,000 people in the province of British Columbia, where I lived for 40 years, lost their jobs. And I don't want to see that happen today. This government needs to get its act together, Madam Chair. Maybe they should take their partisan attitudes, and maybe they should spend more time talking to MPs on the Conservative side who have successfully negotiated deals, such as the softwood lumber deal, NAFTA. After all, aren't we, Madam Chair, all working here together for the betterment of Canadians? As an example, I think they could learn a lot if they just sat down and talked to the honourable member from Abbotsford about how to make international deals. Exactly. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm concerned even further when it comes to softwood lumber, because this Liberal government is failing in other areas to protect the softwood lumber industry. How am I doing for time, Madam Chair? 1 minute, I'm going to have to talk fast. Madam Chair, they're failing us. Pine beetle. I have been working for 2 years with the Minister of Environment to take some serious action with the pine beetle in Jasper National Park. It has destroyed the forest there. It has now moved into the province of Alberta. And in 1 year, the members across would listen, in 1 year, it has increased by tenfold. This government needs to take some action to support Alberta's forest industry. Number two, they need to take a look at our caribou. Our caribou are endangered species. This government is doing nothing to work with the provinces to ensure that these animals are protected. if the Endangered Species Act goes into play, and if the province of Alberta gets its way, it will close down close to 4.9 million acres of our forestry land due to the caribou. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Development.
No, not thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for his speech. Partly about halfway through his speech, he asked, does the government have a plan for softwood lumber? And I would beg to say that yes, we do. We could agree with this motion that the forestry sector is a major employer of Canada, and it is a world leader in sustainable forestry practices. Madam Speaker, we have invested $150 million to support the clean clean technology. We've supported with $867 million towards an action plan. We are taking this very seriously in terms of our negotiations. We've met with U.S. Commerce Secretary Ross. The Prime Minister has met and spoke to President Trump about the industry. As mentioned, we're looking for a good deal for Canada. It will be irresponsible for us to stand in favor of this motion, and I hope that the member opposite could see why with the investments and the conversations we've been having.
The honourable member for Yellowhead.
Well, Madam Chair, it won't take too long to answer that. There's no softwood lumber deal. You can talk, and you can talk, and you can talk. But unless you can talk and walk and develop a plan for the Canadian softwood lumber thing, you are not doing your job.
And I hope that the member was addressing that through the Speaker.
Yes, because I know you
questions and comments. The honourable member for South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member from Yellowhead for his speech. And I know he's concerned about the pine beetle epidemic that's now expanding in Alberta. We've suffered through it for a decade or more in British Columbia, the just unprecedented expansion of that epidemic that killed off millions of acres of forest in British Columbia. And what we found in British Columbia is that no matter what we threw at this epidemic, it just kept on going until the climate, until the weather helped us. These beetles need very cold weather at this time of year. They need short, cool summers, not the beetles, but to fight the beetles. And I'm just wondering what he is asking the government to do to stop this epidemic in Alberta when we found in BC that we could only sit and wait for the climate to answer back. Thank you.
The honourable member for Yellowhead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm asking for a couple of things, Madam Chair. One is that the federal government step up to assist the province of Alberta like it did assist the province of BC. We know a lot more today than we did when the outbreak started in 1977 in the province of BC, in the Spadseasy area of the province. Over the last 3 years, the province of Alberta and the forest companies in the area where the pine beetle were coming through the park have held them at bay until this year, because we do not have the financial resources provincially or through the companies, and they went from 40,000 trees. We knocked down 40,000 trees last year. We kept them at bay. It was 10,000. So we kept them at bay. This year, 540,000 trees. They're running rampant. But where did they come from? They came through Jasper National Park. I've been working with the Minister of Environment and other groups to do some active burning there. We could have stopped them earlier on, but no, it was not done. Ecological integrity or something like that, I'm told. But if they would have taken some action, we could have slowed them down. We may have been able to stop them, because we know a lot more about them today than we did when they attacked us when I lived in BC. Thank you, Madam Chair.